Our first session today is about the changing status of temples. Dr. Chithra Madhavan and Sharan Apparao at the stage. Please do come on stage.
Good morning everybody. I'm Sharan and I'm going to be in conversation with Dr. Chithra Madhavan. Chithra has done her PhD on Sanskrit inscriptions in Tamil Nadu. She's an authority on temples in India, especially South India. She's had a fantastic career so far of many lectures. She lectures in Kalakshetra, in IIT Madras, as well as in Dakshina Chitra. She's an authority on temples. She has a great following. She's had lots and lots of full houses with us in the recent few months, and we're going to be talking about the status of temples and how they've come to be what they are today. And temples are all about patronage, as you know, whether it's the construction or the deconstruction. It's history that has actually dictated what has happened, and you're welcome to read between the lines when we're chatting. So I think shall we start? So Chithra, where do we actually begin, and how do we start with this entire situation, and how do we start with the tragedies that we're looking at on screen? How do we go back to it?
Good morning, Sharan. I'd like to start with, can you hear me now? I'll start with saying that temples today are places that we go to for worship only. We know that we are going to go in, go to the main sanctum, do some kind of a worship, and then come out. And these are some of the gory things that you're seeing on screen that we see in temples today, this and this. And we turn a blind eye to it because it's there all around us. And we don't know any better how it was. So in the next few minutes, I'll give you a bird's eye view of how our temples were in the ancient past and how they have slowly grown to what they are today. What I'm showing you here on screen is a small temple. It's in Bihar. This belongs to the 3rd century BC, to the reign of Ashoka, the great Mauryan ruler. Very difficult to think of this as a place of worship, but that's exactly what it was. We've heard of the Buddhists and the Jains, but this little cave temple belonged to a group, a sect called the Ajivikas, and they were here. A little shrine carved into a hillside and carved to perfection like this, and just a small room inside for them to pray and to meditate. So this is possibly the earliest temple that we have tangible evidence of a temple. We go to Ajanta, as all of you know. This is a very well-known place in Maharashtra. These are all temples for the Buddhists, places of worship, places to stay in to worship Buddha. All this, everything that you see on screen is one piece of stone, carved deep into the sandstone rock over here. These are some of the best pieces of temple architecture that we will see. This is how it is inside the Ajanta cave. All of it is one piece of stone. All of it has been carved to perfection, and you see a figure of the Buddha there right at the end. So from that little cave temple that I showed you belonging to the time of Ashoka, we've come a long way within a few centuries to Ajanta. We then go to a place called Badami, ancient Vatapi, in Karnataka. And you see another cave temple here. This is for Shiva. The first one that I showed you was for the Ajivikas, and then for the Buddhists, and now this is for the Shaivites. Here in these cave temples, they are full of sculptures. They are completely and totally studded with sculptures. And from this time onwards, we get some inscriptions as well, so that we can date these structures perfectly. Within a couple of centuries, in the 7th century, this is our very own Mahabalipuram, our Mamalapuram. We are going to a different phase in temple architecture, where we have left behind the cave temple tradition. We are going into what is called the monolith the monolithic tradition. This whole thing that you see on screen has been cut out of one piece of rock. We in Chennai are so used to thinking of our Mahabalipuram as a tourist spot, as a picnic center. We forget that this is the cradle of South Indian architecture. Every little monument, every little sculpture that you see here means something. And this monolith means a lot, because we are going into the next phase of temple architecture, leaving behind the cave temples, coming into the monoliths. Talking about monoliths, we have to go to Ellora in Maharashtra, where you see the biggest of the 8th century AD. Completely and totally has this Kailashanatha Shiva temple been carved out of the hillside. This picture will say it better. They've scooped out the rock around this one stone, and they have made it into a temple like this. It's simply unbelievable that the hands of man could have made anything like the Kailashanatha temple in Ellora. So as you can see, we are coming step by step. There is more and more development as we are going through the centuries. All this is Ellora. And then we come to a small temple in Kanchipuram. Hardly anyone goes here, though it is a protected monument of national importance under the care of the Archaeological Survey of India. Today it's called the Muktishwara Temple. The ancient name, because of an inscription that has been left behind, is called the Dharma Mahadevi Ishwaram, sponsored not by a king but by a queen in the 8th century AD. And the reason I'm showing it to you is because by now we have left behind the monolithic temple tradition, the cave temple tradition, and have graduated to making something structural out of stone, putting stone upon stone upon stone and actually building a temple. Having come to this phase in the 8th century, we are never going to look back, and this is the kind of temple, putting block of stone upon block of stone, that we are going to see. Next, move on to Kanchipuram, same place, but look at the size of this temple. It's so much bigger than the one we saw here. And this is the famous Kailashanatha temple, which originally was called Rajasimheshwaram, having been constructed in the reign of the king Rajasimha. So temples are becoming bigger in size, slowly, grander in size. The population has increased. There are so many more rituals, so many more things to do inside a temple. And then we come to Thanjavur. I'm only showing you the best examples of every period. Look at the size of this temple. Look at the amount of stone that has been used. Within 3 centuries, 8th to 11th, the temple has come to be this. There's so much in the Thanjavur temple, which I will explain a little later. The height goes up. But we must understand one thing. When we walk into the Thanjavur temple, we don't realize that originally it was not like what we see today. What we are looking at is several centuries of physical development of the temple. Originally, you would have had only this, where I'm pointing, the main shrine, and this mantapa over here. The compound wall would have been there. The 2 gopuras would have been there. A very small Nandi mantapa. None of the other peripheral shrines that you see on this ground map, floor map, would have been there. They were all built in the subsequent centuries. If you walk into the Thanjavur temple, the first thing you will see is that huge Nandi Mantapam. That is not of the period of Rajaraja Chola. That was not there. You have the Subramanya shrine. That was not there. The Ganesha shrine. That was not there. The shrine for Parvati there called Brihannayaki. That too was not there. Nothing was there. They were being added to in the later centuries. So the temple was still quite bare in the time of Rajaraja Chola. We go to the temple of South India. This is Srirangam, the Ranganathaswamy Temple. Again, now I am trying to focus on the horizontal development of a temple over many acres of land over many centuries. It was a small shrine on the bank of the Kaveri, and over the next 2000 years it became this. In 156 acres, 65 shrines, 21 gopurams, innumerable mantapams, etc. This is what we call the horizontal development of a temple. I've been dwelling on South India, so let's go to the north. This is Orissa. This is a very small shrine, extremely well known in Orissa. It's called the Muktishwara Temple. All of it built at one point of time in the reign of one king. But if you, that is in Bhubaneswar, walk across to Puri nearby, you have a different picture altogether. The Jagannath temple in Puri was not built in any one century by any one emperor. It has grown, added to by way of different structures, because it was a temple that was much visited like Srirangam, much revered, and therefore the horizontal movement took place. Khajuraho, as we all know, these are 11th century temples. This is the Kandariya Mahadeva temple. This hasn't grown over many centuries, but nevertheless, look at the architecture. How much more workmanship there is than the previous temples in Madhya Pradesh. Show you some of the sculptures here. There are literally hundreds and thousands of sculptures on the temples of Khajuraho in the reign of the Chandela dynasty. Just look at this. And we are not talking, when you think Khajuraho, people think only of erotic sculptures. I'm afraid that's a very, very, very wrong notion that has been spreading. Maybe 1 in 100 would be of that nature. They are absolutely splendid. So that brings me to the end of the initial introduction, which is only about the movement of a temple physically over many acres of land over the centuries.
So was it all according to the scriptures? I mean, we're talking about the structure here. So how much of it was according to the scriptures, and how were the scriptures or the texts read into for these temples?
You're absolutely right. All the temples across India, north, south, east or west, have been built according to what are called the agamic injunctions. The agamas are texts. You have separate agamas for Shiva temples, separate one for Vaishnava temples. The instructions given there have to be followed to minute perfection.
So was this only for the structure or for the rituals as well? I mean, how did the rituals change, and how did people read the agamas or the texts to change the rituals?
The agamas prescribe not only the building activity of a temple, the directions it must face, where exactly certain components of the temple must be, etc., but also the rituals and the festivals. For example, they very clearly state that there should be 16 types of offerings made to the deity every day. These are called the Shodasha Upachara. An Upachara means an offering, Maryada to the god. One is the Dhupa, or the fragrance that has to be offered, the Deepa or the light, Natya, dance, Sangeeta, music. Everything is an offering to the god, and 16 types had to be done every day. And the temple, every day it had to be done, and the temple had enough money to be able to offer all this to the gods every day.
And this changed. This has been changing. I mean, we have temples to personalities today.
Yes, we do. That's not given in agamas. But yes, things have changed very much over the centuries, and it's also because of the lack of royal support. Whenever we look at an ancient inscription in a temple, we find that royalty and common man alike. I cannot not talk about the contribution of the common man to the temple activities and the growth of temples physically and otherwise. A whole lot was given by people like us, and definitely by the kings and queens and other members of the royal family. So with that kind of wealth that the temple had, they were able to follow every rule that was given in the agama, whether it was rituals and festivals or the physical growth of the temple. All of that was well taken care of. Imagine a temple opening at 5 in the morning to the tunes of music and the dancers over there and all the offerings made to the gods. It would have been an amazing spectacle. Sadly, we hardly have a trace of that today in India.
So all these mandapas were because of these rituals, like the Kalyana Mandapa and the Utsava Mandapas were all part of these daily rituals?
Absolutely. The mandapas that we see today, we look at them as empty spaces, architecturally very beautiful, sculpturally very perfect, and we look at them and we come away. But these were meant to be spaces to be used. I'll show you some pictures a little later. As the festivals increased, as the population of every village and town increased, there was more need for space within the temple premises. Where originally some 100 people would have come, over the course of centuries it became 500 and it became 1,000. Now where were these people to stand and watch all that was going on for the gods, the Abhishekam, etc. So what was initially done inside the sanctum sanctorum or the Garbhagriha was taken out from there for lack of space, and it was brought into these pillared pavilions where people could stand around and see what was happening. So initially what was an 8-pillared mantapa became 16, became 32, became 64, became 100, then became 1,000. So we have such. I'll just show you some examples and the uses to which these numerous mantapas were put. But before that, I would also like to tell you, we know in the south that there is this wonderful structure called a Gopuram. And it is a symbol of the state government of Tamil Nadu. And we all know that the Gopuram is the most eye-catching, beautiful feature of a temple. But we don't know that it was not at all there initially, or if it was a very insignificant structure. This, where I'm pointing, in the Kailasanatha temple is the Gopuram, not this. That is the Vimanam, or the main part of the temple. This little insignificant thing was the Gopuram, which within 300 years became like this, and then by the 17th century it became like this, huge towering structures. This is Srivilliputtur near the Western Ghats, and then later we have some that were unfinished. This is in Srirangam. Unfortunately, it was left in a dilapidated state and later built in the 1980s, making it the tallest Gopuram ever in the whole world. So we see that Gopurams were eye-catching features. All these are Gopurams that have not been completed. We also have Mantapams. This is what you asked me about. Yes. This is in the Kailasanatha temple. Nobody even notices it. This Mantapam was where a huge Vedic college functioned. Inside the Kailasanatha temple, a very great historian called C. Meenakshi has put together the information available from inscriptions with the architectural features of the Kailasanatha temple, and she has mentioned that a very prestigious, very important temple college called the Gatika functioned in the premises of the Kailasanatha temple, in all likelihood inside the Mantapa. So you have a question, how can a huge college function inside a small Mantapa like this? But even if you have a select 20-30 students of high caliber and equal number of teachers, that would make it a high-level Vedic college. Going to Srirangam, this is a 1,000-pillared mantapa that you see. It's like this, architecturally splendid. And many times a year the god is brought out here. This is probably of the 17th century, when the population of this part of the world was maybe less than a quarter of what we have today. But still they had what in Sanskrit we call the Dirgha Darshanam, the far-sightedness to create something this big, knowing that the population would increase, and then they had to be fitted in here. This is a 100-pillared mantapa in Srirangam, exquisite as in exquisite. All this was there to make people be inside it.
So in terms of the patronage, so tell us a little bit more about who built these and how they kept growing and becoming more elaborate.
As I said, it's mostly because of the growth of rituals. I have with me a very fragmentary inscription in Tamil belonging to the 8th century in Kanchipuram. Unfortunately very damaged, and this is what has happened to the sandstone over centuries. Partially we are able to read it. It is in the Pallava script of the 8th century in the Muktishwara temple, and it talks about 14 dancers, lady dancers, who were in the employment of the temple, 2 musicians, one a drummer, they were there. So a temple, as I said, needed all these upacharas, and there were these ladies. We can't say that they were dedicated to the temple. They were employees of the temple. They were paid.
Tell us more about who the temple employed. Yeah, what the kinds of people that they
These
employed.
were the kinds of people the temple employed. You had the priest. Today when we think of the temple, you think only of the priest. But then, long time back, the priest was there, the dancers were there, the musicians were there, the music teachers were there, the dance teachers were there, the watchmen. How many inscriptions we have of watchmen giving donations to the temple? That many. And we have the accountants, because every time you gave a donation, it had to be recorded. Today we have sheets of paper called receipts, and they're given to you. In those days, it was written on the walls of temples like this, that you have given so much of money. You were dedicating animals to the temple. Slowly that's increasing. Somebody gave 20 cows. Why? Because the milk could be used for the abhishekam and all that you had to give to the god. So you had to have
the gardens as well.
Yes, the gardens were there, the gardeners were there. We have all of this in our epigraphs. And we had to have veterinary doctors to take care of the elephants and the cows and all the horses that were dedicated to the temple. That is also there in the inscriptions. And they were also the employees of the temple, veterinary science. So all this was there. So 14 dancers within 3 centuries became 400 dancers in the Brihadishwara temple, and they were on the payrolls. So you can imagine what a huge employer the temple became.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit more about how this changed and how the patronage changed and how it's come to what we are at today.
Oh, it went up like this, slowly. Gradually it increased. The size of the temple, the number of employees, number of donations, number of social activities, everything. I'll give you a little more before we find out how it all came down. It was not only about religion. It was not only about education. It was also how a temple functioned as a space for the local bodies, the panchayats. Today, if you see a movie, you'll see a huge tree and 10 people gathered around, and that's the village panchayat. It actually functioned inside the temple premises. One of the reasons for the mantapa was people sitting there and discussing everything. Every dispute at the local level was settled at the local level. Hardly anything went up to the king. And that was one of the greatest things about administration in India at that point of time. Temples also functioned as banks. You could deposit the extra gold that you have with you, and you could get interest on that. You could deposit your money with the temple. The temple was a bank. The temple had a library. You could walk in and out of the temple using the library, which was manuscripts. You've all heard of Nalanda University, which had a huge manuscript repository. It was there in almost all the temples across India, Orissa, Tamil Nadu, etc.
Something caught my attention, the deposit of the gold and the jewels in the temple. So you think this Padmanabhaswamy temple was actually that? I mean, they amassed this fantastic treasury because of that?
Not only the Padmanabhaswamy temple, every temple had that much. There were huge, huge places where all this gold, whether you are depositing them to get interest or whether you were giving it as a donation, this is why there were many invasions on temples, because they were taken away. The temple was a huge treasure house.
Of course.
That's what happened.
Of course.
Today we found treasures in the Padmanabhaswamy temple, and there may be that many more temples in India.
And I suppose some of them were very well administered and others were not. I mean, if you look at Tirupati today, it's so superbly administered.
Absolutely. Superbly administered, which is how all the temples were, is what I'm trying to say. We have enough and more evidence to tell you the niggling details of the salaries of people, what the kind of activities they were involved in, how the temple granaries were. The temples had huge storehouses of rice and grain, etc. That's where it was kept very, very safely. So all of this was a temple. We're missing all of this today simply because of lack of patronage.
Well, it's a different kind of patronage, isn't it? I think it is a public patronage, but perhaps the public is not actually involved in the day-to-day activities or don't have a say, but every temple gets something from the public. But how did this entire deconstruction happen? I mean, I call it deconstruction of the system, and also physically the physical defacing of temples.
That is definitely a huge issue.
I mean, sometimes we go to some of the temples and you see this garish paint, and you look at these fantastic old photographs and you wonder what happened and how did we allow this?
It has happened over the centuries because we've not been told how scientifically a temple was constructed. I'll take up the issue of temple tanks. We can go all around India and we find that most of the temple tanks are bone dry. You could play cricket there. It's a huge ground. That's how dry it is. And the drier it becomes a garbage dump. Unfortunately, this is the given situation today. But that was not why a temple tank was constructed. The religious purpose was there. Pilgrims had a bath in the Pushkarini, the temple tank. So certain festivals were conducted in the waters of the temple tank. That's one aspect of it. The most important thing is that it was a water harvesting unit. Think of the monsoons that we had just now. And if the temple tank had been maintained the way it should have been, all the tanks in the city and outside of it would be brimming with water today. And we would have no water scarcity for the next 2 years at least. There were inlets. I'm just giving you an example of what has gone wrong. There were inlets into the temple tanks, so that the water that was flowing in the surrounding areas would get into it. And then once it was full, to prevent that water from flowing into the temple, there were outlets, the cutoff point, and then the water would flow out of the outlets. Where would it go? It shouldn't flood the city, it shouldn't flood the town. So there were channels by which it would go and fall into a tank at a lower level, inside the village or outside the village. Once that got full, again an outlet would be there in that tank and it would go to another tank. And finally, very, very, very little would go into the sea or drain into a river or go somewhere. Very little water was allowed to escape. In fact, in many temples, including the Meenakshi temple, Madurai, and in Chidambaram, all the water by way of rain that falls into the premises of a temple are led by underground channels and overground also to fall into the temple tank. Not one drop of water was allowed to go waste at a time when the population was so limited and at a time when they really realized the importance of water harvesting. But now, with the advent of plastic, reed plastic, most of the inlets are blocked. And once you block an inlet, you are not going to allow any water to percolate into the temple tank, and therefore it will remain dry. And if the temple tank remains dry, all the wells in the surrounding area will remain dry. There is no underground water. And then we talk about water shortage. We had it all. We've let it all go.
That's very sad. That's awful, actually. And what about the structures?
There is a lot of insensitivity in India. There is a lot of ignorance. The structures themselves are wonderful pieces of art and architecture, and much more. Our temple was a meeting place. It was an economic unit, a social unit, a cultural unit. Today, we have music and dance festivals in temples. We know that. But these are something that are imposed on temples. Imagine growing up as a child around the temple premises. Every day you have in Tamil Nadu we use the word Talipendi, which is the equal of a Devadasi, dancing in a temple. She was employed by a temple. You could hear the people singing Devaram, the Vedas, the Divya Prabandham, all these Tamil works. You hear the musicians over there. You hear the instrumentalists. You really don't have to be taught anything. It would just come to you. You were listening to it every day. It was not forced on you. It was not imposed on any child. He would definitely know it. And that bhavam was there. All that has disappeared. When you go to a temple, do you see dance? Do you see music? You see it certain times of the year. You see it only in the evenings for 1.5 hours. That was not the way it was. The whole ethos has changed.
Yeah, and I suppose also the lectures that they had in the temples, which hardly happen now. You don't see them anywhere. You don't hear them anywhere.
Absolutely. There is a village called Kuram, about 20 kilometers from Kanchipuram, en route to Bangalore. And there we have a 8th century inscription talking about the Mahabharata being expounded in that temple. And therefore, all the villagers would sit around in the evenings perhaps, or whatever time that they had to spare, and listen to that. This was the Katha Kalakshepam. This was the Harikatha that happened in the temple premises over the centuries. So all that came to you for moral values, ethical values. That was what was taught, not imposed. Children just grew up listening to it. They kind of imbibed the good things. I guess they also knew the importance of spaces like the temple tanks. And how did they maintain the tanks, you're asking? We have inscriptions telling us that fishing was allowed certain times of the year in the temple tanks, and the tax had to be paid. And with that money, the tanks were cleaned. So it is a very neat system in place.
And also these rituals, how did they change and how did they become so different, as you know, from what you've talked about earlier?
The rituals basically changed because
like the Rath festivals became something so elaborate. It was a simple situation of a Utsava Murti going around a temple.
Yes,
for the public.
That was a simple Utsava Murti going about in a simple chariot around the temple to meet his people, to meet his subjects.
Also, was it a way of keeping out a certain section of people?
It's just that since certain sections of the people were kept out, the god went out as a Utsava Murti to meet them. It's the opposite. And then they started making these elaborate, very beautiful temple chariots. We have to think of the employment that the temple was generating. If you had to make a temple chariot like that, that many carpenters, that many blacksmiths, that many other people survived. If you were bringing a piece of stone from 35 kilometers away to build the Tanjavur temple, imagine, just think about the amount of employment that was given by the temple. Same thing, everything became elaborate, so much more employment was given. And then again I repeat, with the withdrawal of royal patronage, with the lack of money, all these festivals and rituals came down. It tapered down. And if you walk into the countryside, into some of the smaller towns and villages, you could cry, because all these enormous temple chariots made with a lot of difficulty are right there in the sun and the rain, and they are disintegrating by the day. All teak wood and made of all kinds of wood. How many hours people would have spent. This, I am saying, is because of the insensitivity of the general public to the amount of art they are seeing around them. We keep saying there's so much art in India. I don't know for how much longer it will be there if we continue to be the people we are.
Well, we are very lucky that we have more than any other country in the world. But yes, how do we keep this? Why don't you show everybody some of these horrendous slides that you've shown us earlier?
Before I do that, I just want to tell you how much of an employer the temple is for any given festival. This is from our very own Kapalishwara temple streets. For Vinayaka Chaturthi, you have these umbrellas. You have all these lovely things that are being made. We don't think of the temple as an employer. While it's being built, it's an employer. After it's built to cater to all the needs of the temple, the people around are employed. So all these things are made and they are sold. The flowers are there. The grass is offered to the god there for Vinayaka Chaturthi. And then you have the toranams for so many festivals that are sold in the little shops all around. Fruits also. So this is how the temple becomes an employer. Imagine the number of artists that were commissioned to paint inside the temple premises. Artists of great caliber. This is an 8th century painting, traces of an 8th century painting in the Kailasanatha temple. If we had been a more sensitive race, all these paintings would have been preserved over the centuries. This is there from the Ranganathaswamy Temple in Srirangam. It's not there today. It was there about 2 months back.
But I have a question. Who is the one who actually decides which is the right style? We have the situation in the Tanjore temple where you have the Chola paintings that were painted over by the Nayaka paintings. Okay, we've taken them out and preserved both the things, but which one is right? Which one, how can you not overpaint, or how can you leave it?
At some point of time, even in the 17th century, there was this insensitivity. Most of you know that on the walls of the Tanjavur temple were Chola paintings of the period of Rajaraja Chola. And in the 17th century, a dynasty called the Nayaks came to rule Tanjavur, and their artists painted directly over the Chola paintings. But then, because of very many reasons, the Archaeological Survey of India is able to remove the layer of Nayak paintings and to expose the Chola paintings without damaging the Nayak paintings. That cannot be done for every other temple because they are not simply painted over by another layer of paintings. They are simply whitewashed. This is happening and everybody knows it because an old painting is not bright. Over the years it has dulled and it has a layer of soot. But then if you call conservationists, they can restore. I'll show you paintings that have been restored. This one you see is on the ceiling of one particular part of the Ranganathaswamy Temple in Srirangam. It's on the ceiling, about 20 feet high. Now, why on earth would they paint on the ceiling, and why on earth would they put an inscription in there in Telugu? It doesn't make sense. Nobody can stand and look at it forever. And this is completely from the Bhagavata Purana. All the paintings are there. Now, it's just that painting a temple was part of the ritual of the temple. We can't think of a ritual only as dance and music. Painting was also a ritual, and all the parts of the temple were painted. Taking you to Thiruvarur, this is the Devashriya Mantapam, and there, can you see on the ceiling? Look at that part. All the paintings have gone, and these have been restored. So you can restore. This is the Sthala Puranam of this temple, the traditional story of Muchukunda, and these are all from North India, showing small shrines over here. These are all the rituals and festivals that have taken place over the centuries and recorded by paintings, some in temples, some not in temples but about temples. From our ancient past come all these. Just see how it was. This is like a kavadi.
Like a ritual.
Again, a ritual of a temple. This is from Nath Dwara in Rajasthan, where so many types of food offerings are given to a Krishna who is worshipped as a little child over there. This is some of a Rath Yatra.
Beautiful Utsava Murti.
Thank you for some of these paintings. This amazing chariot festival, this is how it was across, believe me, every little village in India had a little temple or a big temple. And every little or big temple had a little or a big chariot. Everything was there, completely with music, dance, etc. These are some of the
horrendous sights.
Very horrendous. I have a whole collection of horrendous pictures from temples, but I choose to bring only a few. This is what it has come to. As a sculpture, it's nothing great, but it is at least 150 years old. But then, in order to prevent vandals from coming into the temple and destroying these sculptures, we have put up this metal fence. And to keep that metal fence in place, you have to put these metal bands. And these metal bands are the worst kind of vandalism that I know. And then look at this.
This is part of the patronage. Supposedly.
Patronage, yes, because you think you are trying to protect a temple, you are not. Now, if you've gone and done this to a sculpture, what you have done is you've drilled two holes into the heart of Vishnu, and you have inserted these iron rods. And then you've kind of kept him in place with this thing as well. Now, what would happen is, at some point of time, if you decided to renovate the temple the way it should be renovated, the way it should be conserved, the way it should be preserved, you would pull out these iron rods. And when you did, that whole sculpture will come off. That's what will happen. I am showing you some sculptures that are not very old, but this is increasingly happening. Just look at this. This is vandalism of a huge kind over here. This I'm showing you, I'm not naming these temples. This is a 12th century shrine. And what you are seeing is the rim and the spokes of a very beautiful Chola wheel, where the entire structure was designed like a ratha, like a chariot in stone. 2 wheels, 2 horses, and the whole structure being pulled forward. And then what has happened? Some mindless renovation has happened. I am pinning this down to insensitivity. If the person who ordered this kind of cementing of a 12th century granite wheel to be done had been sensitized in school or by his parents about the glory of Indian heritage, he would not have commissioned this to be done. This is all I'm saying.
How do we solve this? I mean, this is horrendous. We can't be the country with the best temples and the best sculptures and the best architecture and then do this to it.
Yes, this is a country with a lot by way of architecture and sculpture. The wheel that I'm showing you is again a 12th century wheel that has not been damaged because this temple is a UNESCO World Heritage structure and it is under the care of the Archaeological Survey of India. This is how this wheel should have also have been. Okay, now the way to go about it, I would say, is to go to schools. I've thought about it and I don't see any other way. School children should be sensitized into knowing about the greatness of our heritage.
That's one aspect, but what about all these PWD or CPWD people, and how do we actually sensitize them? How do we go to them and how do we convince them that this is not it?
I'm afraid I don't know how. I wouldn't know the way, but it has to be done, and it has to be done immediately, because I am a traveler and I'm traveling to the smallest villages and towns, not only the bigger cities, especially to the smaller villages, and there is so much insensitivity. In the name of renovation, they do all kinds of things. I've said this before and I'm saying it now. It's because of lack of knowledge of how to go about it. What the kings were doing, now the people have to do. And they don't know the means of how exactly to go about it. So when you see some old dull painting belonging to 300 years ago, you want to spruce up the temple, whitewash it immediately. And then you see some broken inscriptions, you don't know how to conserve it, so you stick polished granite on it, or you stick glazed tiles on it. Immediately you think the temple looks better and it's spruced up. This is what is happening all along. Inscriptions like this, like the ones you're seeing on the walls of the temple, are the basis of history textbooks. We know India's history from these inscriptions. You know the scripts that India had, you know the languages that India had from these inscriptions. North India, South India, East, West, wherever. We've had that many languages, that many scripts that we are not aware of now. We don't use those scripts, but we must know that India had that much. And if you're going to do this is very bad. But at least in the next rains, this will come off because it's paper. What do you do to this? This is oil paint, this is chemical paint on the walls of temples. This will not go away in a hurry. This just won't go away. Look at the paintings. Look at what's happening to them. These are 17th century Vijayanagara paintings that I'm showing you from one particular temple. And this is what has happened. Completely, they are trying to restore these things, but it's very, very difficult. And then you do all this. Believe me if I tell you that's a Chola age Ganesha that is sitting there in the niche, which is called the Devakoshta of one of the better known temples in the suburbs of Chennai. You do all of this to it. If this is not insensitivity, what is? On the part of the people who do it, on the part of the authorities who allow the people to do it?
So what do we do?
That's you're asking me that again and again. I don't, the people concerned, the general public and the authorities have to be given a wake-up call. I don't know how exactly this is to be done. There are that many people in the audience. I'm told this is going to go up on YouTube. Those of you here may have much better ideas than me, but it is mandatory, it is imperative that our structures be preserved. They are not just religious institutions as we see them today. That is very important. That's why they were created. That's how they were created. They continue to be that. But much more. These are what we have given to us by our ancestors. These are what we need to preserve. We need to know where we came from to be able to take this forward.
Yeah, and we still have the craftsmen alive.
Still have the craftsmen, absolutely.
The skills alive.
The skills are alive, they must be utilized. If in some temples, they take out the temple chariot, they remove it piece by piece because it's deteriorating, they don't know sometimes how to put it back. But we still have craftsmen who know, and they are there in different parts of India. They must be called, and that activity must be passed on to the future generations.
So shall we throw this open to the audience? We'd love ideas.
Yes, please.
I've been traveling for about 6 weeks right now around India. And one of the places I went to was Hampi. It's interesting to see that some of the temples which were now under ASI and which should ideally be, in a sense, just monuments of recording the history, if they're in any kind of shape, they get co-opted back into temples, taken over by people putting tube lights, and ASI seemingly doesn't do very much about it also. They let that happen, where what would be a monument, a historical monument, effectively, not a living temple, has been co-opted back into a living temple in a very insensitive way. Where does ASI come into it, and what are the kind of rules around fighting that kind of thing?
Many of these temples were already in worship. So that amount of worship still continues. And we can't not allow tube lights into a temple in the present scenario. They have to be there. We can't just depend on wick lamps anymore. But as long as they don't mar sculptures or inscriptions, if they are in a place where we don't really see them and they just give us light, so be it. There are certain
today
things.
with technology, there are many situations where
Yes.
you don't have to have, you can have remote sensors to set off lights. There's so much we can do today actually. No, how do we actually, I don't think it's about how to do it. I think it's the authorities who are doing it. I really think that's where the problem is.
The temples that are non-ASI are in a far worse state. As long as these lights are tucked away somewhere and they just help us find our way around and we don't see them being very visible, that's enough. But they have to be there because we are in a century where we need all of this.
So I have a related question. In some temples in Tamil Nadu, for example in Sri Rangam, I definitely saw this. When you go inside the sanctum sanctorum, the place over there is very poorly lit. Like there is only one wick lamp surrounding such a huge structure, and so there you are not able to see the idol very clearly, or whatever the thing that you are supposed to see. So is it part of temple scripture that you only have to see it in poor light, or were there more wick lamps when in the time of kings?
In the past we had only wick lamps. So we are supposed to see the god in the dark interior of the Garbhagriha with the help of a small light shown by the priest. That was how it was supposed to be. And if in any temple it continues that way, I am very grateful. Because in other temples you have neon lights completely in the Garbhagriha. That's not how it's supposed to be at all.
Yeah, so I have one more question. Where do we learn about temple architects? I mean, aren't they the real celebrities behind all these temples? Like, there is practically no information available to the general public about who built this temple, and we only learn about the kings and the deities inside. The architects are left out.
No, in some temples we have the Tanjavur temple, name of the architect of the Tanjavur temple is given, but you're right, most of the time they remain anonymous. The sculptors are definitely anonymous. That was part of the culture of India. You just do it for the god. You were paid, of course. These were not slaves doing it. They were employed, but then their names remained hidden.
Yeah, but the artists, it is art. You're calling it art, so the artist has to be given credit.
Yes, the sad part is authorship in craft is something that we're all fighting for now. I think we have time for one more question.
How do we sensitize people? You both were mulling about it. The same thing I speak about what is happening to the Dalits. We have to start young. We have to start such lectures in schools. From adolescence, at least the next generation should be sensitized, and that's the only way, I think.
I agree with you 100%.
There's no other way.
Yes.
This is how the French sensitized their people towards cinema. We have to do it for all arts, definitely to save these things.
It has to be done very soon, across India.
Immediately and take away the religion.
I think I feel it a little differently. I feel the people working in the government, I think there has to be training programs for them even now. Even, I mean, it's
I don't disagree, Sharan, but we know the real scene. If we really have to start something, it has to start young. And regarding the tanks, the water bodies, you were speaking about the employees by the temple. There was a very interesting system of Mudal Madayan, Idai Madayan, Kadai Madayan in every village, every town. The Mudal Madayan was always employed by the temple. The Idai and Kadai were employed by the society according to the provinces or parts they were. So these are the three people who are vested with all powers to control the water bodies, to let it out, to drain everything.
Absolutely. We had a fantastic system.
I think we have to go back to the public to help us out with this. And I've been asked to wrap up. So thank you, Chithra. Thank you so much. That was lovely. Our conversations will continue, of course.
Thank you, Sharan.
Thank you very much.